Hello everyone and welcome back to MixBuzz TV mixing and mastering tutorials on YouTube. I'm your host David, and in this video I'm gonna show you what happened with the bass guitar on this mix. For this mix I needed a growling distorted bass, very present and very upfront, especially on the verses because the arrangement was minimal and I had only drums, vocals and bass on the verses, so the bass had to make a statement and be one of the main elements. There are a silly amount of automation in this mix, on everything pretty much, but especially on drums, which is pretty distorted too at times, and the bass had to match. The problem was that the original track was kind of boomy and had no bark, no mids, and even the bottom end was there, but it was a little bit slow. I needed this growling bass, so I had to make several copies of the original track and treat them differently and also make some parallel tracks. The end result came out pretty cool, so I thought about showing you some of the things that I've done, especially because I used a cheap external effect unit for it, and I hope it's going to be interesting for you to see how I used it. The mix is not released yet, so I can play you the whole thing. I'm missing my API 2500 on the 2 bus, so please keep that in mind. But like all my mixes, as soon as they are released, you can find them on our SoundCloud page, so make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook to get notified when a new mix is out. But let's get to our bass. Before we start, let me say things don't necessarily need to get this complicated, but sometimes it happens, and if the end result is cool and it fits the song, that's all that matters. So let me play you the track for a second. It's a rock metal mix. So as you can hear, very thick track, very big guitars, big bass, and as you can hear in the verses, there's the bass that it's pretty much alone with the drums. There are vocals, which I'm not playing you right now, but yeah, the bass is the main instrument in there, like here. So as you can see, I have this black track here, which I called bass print. And I printed all the different tracks that I treated differently, sum them and print them to this stereo track. So let's take a look at the original bass track and all the copies and the different sounds that I got out of it. So originally I only had this red track here that I'm playing you, bypassing all the processing. And I had this distorted track here, which, like I said, I used, but very low in level. So let's take a look at the analyzer for this original bass track. As you can see, from the analyzer, there's a ton of sub frequency energy and not much in the way of mids and highs. It doesn't bark, so it was pretty plain. The first thing that I did is process this track, cutting some subs and removing some frequencies around 700. The level difference is for gain staging, obviously. Now, the first thing, as you can see from these EQ, that I thought was, okay, I'm gonna get the clean low end from this track, and I'm gonna mult it, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna distort the copies and keep this one clean just for the bottom end. So I pretty much did a bandpass. and the limiter just to keep it dynamically contained. At this point, I copied the track, which is this blue one here, and I run it into a pod, a Line 6 pod version 2. As you can see, it had the insert here, which now is bypassed because I'm not on the studio system, and then just the SSL and the limiting. But I ran this track through the pod, and we are going to take a look at it. We're going to take a look at the routing for that effect. And I printed the result, which is this one. So let's take a look at what I did with the pod. So for distorting bass, I often use this Line 6 pod version 2. It's like $50 used. And I like this unit for everything but guitars, really, for distorting vocals, drums, snares, and specifically bass. Now, I'm coming out from my SSL converters, and I'm going into the reamp box, the capo reamp box that I have. Out from the reamp into the input of the pod, and of course the output of the pod is going back into the SSL converters. So it's pretty simple. It's just a loop with the Line 6 as an insert used as an effect. And pretty much I scroll through the different algorithms, different distortions, and see which one I like. I usually don't touch any other thing. I just make sure, especially on bass, that I have reverb all the way down and the effects bypassed, but that's about it. The first thing that I do is I decide which kind of distortion fits the song, even because this distorted bass is going to be summed to the original clean one, so I usually monitor them together. But one thing with this specific unit that I make sure I switch when I use it on bass is this button on the back here. This switches between direct amp and air mode. On bass, I like it on direct amp mode because the air mode does two things. It seems to switch the phase, to switch polarity, and second, it doesn't sound as in phase as I like the bass to sound. It cuts a lot of low end, and so let's scroll through some of them and hear how they sound. I think it was the rectified algorithm. Let's hear it. It's a really nice unit for things like this. Got some pretty nice distortions, and if you want, you can tweak all the parameters, but usually I just go with a distortion that I like, and if I have to, I EQ or change something in the mix. So that was pretty cool. It gave me the sound that I wanted. It gave me the bark that I wanted, the aggressiveness of the bass, which combined with the low-end, clean low-end bass track sounds like this. And then there's the original distorted track, which, like I said, is really low in level right now. But as you can see, the level is automated. And on the verses, you can hear it a little more. And what I did then, like I said, is to send these tracks to an audio track and print it and print the result, print the sum of the different bass tracks, which ended up being here, black one. And there's some processing on the printed track as well. I have the NLS channel, I have my SSL, as you can see, some EQ to get a little more bark in the mid. The BrainWorks dynamic EQ to take care of one specific note that were popping out. Then the Pro MB sidechained with the kick. And like I said, things don't need to get this crazy, but sometimes, you know, it happens. And if it sounds good, it's all that matters. But this wasn't enough. And the funny thing is, I was aware I was being crazy. So I called this send crazy bass. What I did is I sent the printed track with all the processing on, all these plugins on, to an aux, which I called crazy bass. And here I have the fuzz box with this simulation of a guitar toy, and it sounds like this. This is the EQ, so it's band passed, and this it just added to the bass print with all the processing. And it's actually more noticeable than you'd think. Listen how it sounds without the crazy toy bass. It adds another layer of, you know, distortion, of color, of craziness. Like I said, things got really, really crazy and complicated on this mix, but it sounds good. Sounds good to me. And so I kept it, and this is again how it sounds with the drum, which, as you can see, has a lot of automation and parallel channels. So we are probably gonna take a look at this in future videos. All these yellow aux tracks are all parallel drums and different distortions for the drum. So I don't even remember which one is supposed to be muted and unmuted right now. Okay, so yeah, it was pretty intense, so to speak, with just one single track of bass. I ended up with two different distortions, one run into the pod. The concept is to use guitar amps for bass distortion. I really love to do it on mixes like this, where it fits the song, obviously. So I hope that will give you some ideas to experiment with. And of course, you can use the pod or other units alike for other things. Like I mentioned, I like it for distorting vocals and snares, drums in general. But let me know if you have a cheap effect box that you use in this way. I'm sure many of you do. Let me know what's your favorite in the comments down below. So this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some ideas. If you liked it, please don't forget to click the like button. Every like counts. If you have any question, leave it in the comment down below. Join us on Facebook and Twitter to keep in touch with us, ask questions, enter our giveaways, and stay updated with all the news, the upcoming series, and videos. Please keep supporting MixBuzz TV by sharing the videos and linking the channel on social media, Facebook pages, blogs, and forums. Subscribe if you haven't already, and see you next time.